Okay, so we got a few things up on the board here. This is kind of just a song in the game, but I love this picture into it because of what I'm about to do here for Lynx over here. Now, inside of here, this is super critical for a bluestone mason training that I do in a given set. Now, there's a lot of things going on here. Here being the 2D version of some, what do we got here? We got the frame rate, the offset nature of some of this topology, and figuring out the map.
That intersection will become the new offset 0.
This is going to have spectrums.
This function is
this
only
is going
used
to
when
have
link is at an end, not at 0, even though it's also an intersection. But
even when this guy's
it,
explaining
link
this,
can only take
like
up
you
a few
almost
discrete
know
points
42
on the line.
is in there, don't
Doesn't need
you?
to be snapped to the grid again if he moves back and forth.
He'll
this
say,
can change,
I don't.
however,
He says
when link
something.
Is knocked back. A damaged knockback
I don't know why he
link
does
by
this or
32
why
pixels.
this
If
fundamental
he started here, for example, after moving by 32 pixels,
would be
he can
done
end up
for the
with
program. Well, there's all
offset
kinds of
-0.5,
reasons for the
treated as
programming to do
-1.
it, but there, a lot of the times these guys were
If he presses a
smart.
perpendicular direction,
These guys
he
were
will first need to
smart.
walk to the nearest
I don't know what
intersection,
they were
in this
going
case
on,
to
but
the right.
it's almost like
That moves
spectrums
him
and
by 1.5
colors and
pixels
some
to
stuff
offset
that
1,
goes
which
into
is
the
again
programming that you
misaligned,
get
but in
into
the other
when
direction.
you meet
So, next
42
frame,
over here for the
moves to
first time.
nearest
That damn
intersection,
kill
this
agent,
time to the left,
the
and ends
angel
up
of
where he
death,
started,
you
back
being
at
you on the other end of this
0.5.
one.
Link is stuck in an endless back and forth, never quite aligned with the grid.
Okay, super
This bug
critical
most
on this
likely showed up
battlefield
in
about
development because
topologies for the
programmers
speed
implemented a
run.
correction.
Which
When
one
a
of these
perpendicular
paths
direction is
out
pressed,
here
if
get you
the
killed,
nearest
what
intersection
gear
that
you
link is
have,
about to move
what
to is the
equipment
one
you're
at
doing,
offset
what
0.
team
The grid
unit you
offset is
have,
shifted
the
by 8,
distance and
that will
time
now
that
be
you
moving
go
towards an
through
end, allowing
on
the
some
snap to
pens
the
rows
intersection
and
to
stuff
happen.
like that.
This
Just as an
corrected
arbitrary
the
set.
knockback issue, but
I just
introduced
got
a
done with
screen
5th
scroll
grade
glitch.
algebra,
By
and the guy
positioning
gets
link
out there with
exactly here, at
out
offset
on the beginning of
3.0,
what is
and
5th
pressing
grade
the
algebra. He
perpendicular
starts with
direction for exactly
infinity
one frame.
and starts
This
using
sequence of
quarters
events
to break
happens.
down the area
Link
of a
is misaligned with the
triangle,
vertical grid, so
and
he
then
needs to
goes
move to
through
the
this
nearest
infinity
intersection,
over
which
1,
is to the
infinity
left.
over 2,
However,
and starts
that
getting into the
intersection
pie
is at
chart,
offset
and it's just
0, so to make sure that he snapped to it
ridiculous.
correctly, the grid offset
Ridiculous.
is shifted 8 pixels to the right until Link reaches the intersection. Now, Link is at offset -5, and he moves to the left by 1.5 pixels, moving to -6.5. Note that if he moves for a second frame, he will end up at the intersection and everything will behave as normal.
This is the world record speed. Picking up on glitches in the real world, not going through Castle 1, not going through Castle 2, but that's alright, because that's the real world as you deal with this. But I'll take a pause on this one for a minute.
Apparently over 1,800 of these green bushes. Now if we zoom out and look at the whole map, it actually looks like I've made
So
a good
zoom
amount
out.
of progress.
You're standing
So I
out there,
decided to do
zoom
the
out
exact
for a
same
minute,
again,
would you,
but
for me?
brown bushes this time.
Yeah,
Luckily,
in the
they're
training
all
what
this-
this
I could
does,
select
this
the
is
entire
this is a
group of bushes
fun
and copy and
practical
paste
way
the
to
entire
do
group,
this.
so I didn't
And
have to actually copy and
as
paste
double
thousands of
down,
bushes
you got
one by one.
kids?
After finishing all the bushes, I decided to start modeling these rock statues. I don't know what they're actually supposed
You
to
know,
be,
not
but
only
to
is
me
this
they look
going
like
to
snails,
become
so I called
something
them
real
snail
in the
rocks.
program
And I don't
for
know
you,
what's wrong with my brain, but once again, I made a model that
but
looks
we
good from
also
every
have
angle
to
except for the front.
pixel
And it
art
actually
this
looks
thing.
almost identical to the front-facing Koopa that I made previously. And now I decided that I want to start creating
But
the water.
look, this
I
is
could
the
have
map
just
that
placed
you
a
should
flat
be able to
texture on
make
top of the
on
ground and
this.
called it
This,
water, but that would be boring. So I grabbed the water share that I've used in previous videos and used it again here with some textures that I made for the water. In order for the share to work properly, the object it's used on has to have multiple faces to make it look like the water is moving.
It doesn't
If you use
matter.
it on just
Remember,
one giant face, it makes it look
these
really
are
bad, which is
similar
probably why I
but
didn't look all that
different.
great when I used it in the Sonic video. So I used
realistically,
ProBuilder to
again,
make a
I
new
just
shape
break that
and model
down
it
and say
along
you
the
guys
water.
are the
I don't
salty
really know
short
much
of
about
the
3D
ones
modeling,
that know
but
how
I'm pretty
to
sure having a
do
lot of
this.
faces like this is generally
This is
bad, but it
overhead
doesn't lag
on
my game, so, oh well.
this
Now I wanted to
3D
make it look like the
version
water
of
level was
the
below beach,
deluge,
but the problem is that I used
the
one giant flake to create
mangroves
the
over
entire
here,
map. Apparently,
of how
there's
it
some
plays the
experimental
same way.
feature
Now,
in ProBuilder
obviously, I'm
that
not
you
going
can
to push
use to
this
cut
like the
holes in faces,
mangroves.
but when I tried
Temperatures
to
are
use it,
different.
Unity just
Somebody
crashed.
dies.
So I tried it again,
This goes
and
different
it
in a
crashed
hurry.
again. I kept trying until
So
finally
we're just
it worked
keeping
one
this
time
on
when I used a
the
smaller
backlog
cube.
over
But
here.
after that, it kept crashing, so I decided, alright, the water's just going on top of the
crashing,
beach now.
kept
And you know,
crashing,
technically I'm
and
not wrong.
pre-log
I continued
training
modeling the rest
variables
the
of
ponds
this
and the lakes
system.
and one of the
And it's
rivers.
going to live
I
off
decided
of
to save
that
this river until
reciprocal
later, and you'll see why
up
when I
in
get
the
back to it.
muon
At this
collisions
point, I
up in
decided to start
here,
modeling the brown rock structures that cover pretty much the
or the
rest of the
particle
map. The reason why I
accelerator
held
around
off doing
here,
this is because all
of
the
you
ladders that
being
change the elevation everywhere.
you
There are
being
some
this value inside
inconsistencies
here.
with the
I like
logic
to
of the
play it.
ladders.
I was like, I'll
For
play it,
example,
but I'm also
down
pretty
here, there's a
salty
ladder
about
that
it.
goes up, which should mean that everything from here
Now-
on should be higher than the rest of the map. But continuing on from there, there's one more
In
ladder
here.
that leads up to another point that's even higher.
you know, there's a lot of factors that you got to understand.
It doesn't make sense for 2 ladders to reach the same height as just 1 ladder, so that must mean that somewhere along the way the ground itself went down.
Well, let's look at the explanation of how that I
changed the elevation to match up with the ladders. The first spot
why
is right
there's
here
an
where I made
angle,
downwards ramp,
not necessarily
and
an
one is over here
angel,
alongside the river, which is why I decided to pull off on that river.
this
From here on, I just did a bunch of
x-axis
modeling
going
to
right
create
back to the
rock
map
structures, and I gradually made the height
on
increase
some programming details.
Stopping at positions negative 0.5 and 1, skipping over 0 and 0.5. So he bypasses the grid intersection, which in turn bypasses the collision detection with the edge of the screen. This causes Link's horizontal position to overflow past 255
Your missionary
and back
position.
to 0, and so he wraps around and pops out on the other side of the screen. Note that Link's position is on this
Now,
corner
you
of the
can't
sprite.
guarantee on that
Therefore,
line
the
right
collision
there, but we're
detection
looking
with the far
across
left
this
wall
field
fails
right here
because
and
at this
going,
point, the wall is
how
at
do I
0
do
and
that?
Link is at
And then all of a
248,
sudden somebody
nowhere
comes
near
up
the
with
wall.
the idea and it's like,
Remember,
bloop,
this
you
is
pop
pixel
up on the
perfect
other
and a
side of the
single frame
motivation,
button press
the
every time Black
trajectories, the
While it can
standards
allow
under
Link
that
to scroll the
value.
screen from inside walls and take
And
major
then there's a
shortcuts.
salty that
It's
just
also
couldn't
often
be
used
big,
just
bad,
to
and
save a couple
nasty
of seconds
and
of
have the
You may wonder why Black
biomechanics to
took so
just
long
beat
to enter
feet
the dungeon.
across that
This
desert
was no
in a
mistake.
timeline
It turns
regardless
out he
of
was
the mission, the
manipulating the
standards,
dungeon's
the
random
situations, or
pattern by loading
otherwise.
it on a specific
Because it's going to
frame.
be some
You may be
compressible
familiar with
numbers
this
over your
concept
head.
from the NES
And that's usually
Mario
the
games.
look that you give
Well, The
somebody.
Legend of Zelda works the same way. The game's random number
NZ42,
generation function produces
you
a
know,
new number
whatever,
in every frame,
666.
and it goes through a
I'm
long sequence. It takes
percentageably,
about
well,
9
I
minutes
just
to start
posted one
repeating.
from
But the
Fermilab
trick is, when
where
powering
he's
on the
got,
console,
they
the
got
sequence
the
always
talking about
starts
the
at exactly
neutrino,
the same point every
and
time.
33 and a
So, after a
third,
fixed number of
666
frames,
come
the
up,
random number will
16.7,
always be the same between every
16.7,
reset.
and
Because enemy behavior makes
66.6.
heavy use of this random function,
you know,
entering
when
a
we
screen
got the
on the
unit
correct
out
frame
here,
can set their pattern
and
to a
we're trying to
favorable
figure
one.
out which
Note
of
that
these
because of another
values
mechanic that
is
we'll get to later, there are
a
still two
beneficial
possible
pattern
patterns
to
on any
walking
given
into
frame.
that dungeon
There's
for.
just one
Well,
tiny
there's a
problem.
lot of
The
biological
game runs
clock.
at
You know,
60
I mean,
frames per
Zelda
second.
is the
Can
female
Black
that
Attack really
Lynx
enter
is
the
running
dungeon
after,
frame
and
perfectly?
inadvertently,
Well,
Lynx
the answer
is,
no.
Zelda
Can't
is the
reliably
one
do
that's
that.
got to be a
But
princess
thankfully, he
to
doesn't
make
need
Zelda
because
run
of
after
frame
him.
rules. The
Okay?
frame rule is a
And
pattern
that is
that
real,
repeats itself
that
on
it's
a
going to
fixed
be
cycle of
forever
some
and
length
ever and
greater
ever.
than one
Mario,
frame.
Princess
Again,
Peach.
this concept is very important in Super Mario Weather.
as you go back, because I'm pretty sure this area is supposed to be Death Mountain. I also finished modeling the river all the way up to the top, past the waterfall where there's a little pond.
Well, this
It's
is
also
something
worth
fun I want
noting
you
that there's a
guys
secret in the
try
top
to
right
play
corner of the
with.
map. In the original game, there's
Utilize
actually an
this
invisible
kind
path
of
leading up to a higher
polarizing
area. So I
aspect.
replicated
Remember,
by
this
turning off
is
collisions on one of the blocks
cyclical,
so that you can reach the ladder.
transitory
Now, if you zoom out, it looks like pretty much
photons.
everything on the map is
You are
complete, except for two
basically
areas with
energy,
white rock structures
you are
over here
basically
and
a
over here.
ball.
I made one
You
more texture
are
for the white
a,
rock,
I
including
am
the outlines
a.
for these last two 3D models.
Inside here,
There are
I can
also
be
two
a
rows of white
programmer, but I'm not a
bushes, so I
very
had to
good
go and
computer
change to a new
programmer
color
in the way
palette
that
for the
this
bushes
guy
to create a
is.
new material.
I don't know
And
the
then, since this
equipment,
is a
I don't know
graveyard,
the
I had to
desert,
make new
but I'm
models for
usually
the
pretty good
gravestones.
out here in
I
the
also
desert
had
to
to create
figure out the
material to make the
trajectory
ground
against
into a
this
break
guy.
order
I'd be
in
like,
these
wait,
areas.
let me map
At
it
this point,
first.
if you zoom out, it looks like the map is
Yes,
complete.
that is
Now
the
I just
right
have to create a bunch
answer,
of
but it
props to
is
put on the
not
finishing touches.
the
Other than the
rightest
bushes
of
and the snail rocks, there are
answers
various other props
that
throughout the world.
kind of
One
goes
which
into
is these
what
suits of armor
Special
that when you
Forces is
touch
about.
actually turn into an enemy.
Well, I make the
We'll
joke
get to that part
about
later.
McDonald's
At first, I thought I
Special
could just use the
Forces.
model
How
that
do
I
you
made for
get
Link and swap on a new head to create the suit
from
of armor? But it actually ended up being
an
a bit more
apprentice,
involved, since the armor is actually
counter
thicker
person
than
to
Link
manager?
Then I started making the model for the
Topology
trees,
might
and I
be
realized while modeling the
relative
trees
here.
that the big
Somebody
tree
may not
dungeon
move.
entrances
You may
reused the
not
same
be
models,
talking about a
except with a
manager of the
basement in
company
between.
you are
And it was a
working
pretty
at.
similar process for
Might be
making the other
another
dungeon
building. Might be
entrances
having
and
to
obelisks.
move.
Then
It
I
might
placed these
be
models in various
any
places
one
on
of
the
these
map, and turned up
frames
collisions
that
on the
kind of
openings
goes
so that
into
Link
the
could walk through them.
program limit
I
for what
also
this
realized
does.
that there are actually
The
a few
truth of the
different
matter
versions
is,
of the
let's go
dungeon
back to Zelda
entrances.
here.
One
Weathers, but it exists here as well. This time,
See
the
if I can
frame
get a
rule
good
is tied to
overhead
the
map.
animation when entering or have been killed so far. For example,
This
Red
is
Dark
funner than you
Beat has
think.
a
There's
41%
actually a
chance
lot
to
of cool things mathematically that happen with something like that. It's not your average sectors, not your average columns and rows, and it's compressed grid by what happens inside of here. And that happens a lot at McDonald's. It happens a lot in the stone mill for sure. For sure, it happens a hell of a lot down in here. But I'm just looking for something real specifically here.
So by memorizing this table,
Alright, so let's assume that, you know, the overhead map, Let's see if I can get a good snap of it. I just had one a second ago. Not gonna help. There we go.
The entrance to level 5 is normal.
Alright, so each one of these little grids is its own little world you can be in. And I usually do that on the stone mill, right? I'd say I'm on the thermaler's position. Alright, that's burning rock. It's got an air crane on it. It moves rock over to the saw. The saw guy comes in. This grid next to it, given those all those hashes and everything where Zelda's running around at for frame rates inside of here. And basically I could say you do this, you come down, you go up, you do this, and then you're into the next frame, which is the sawyer's position. Actually it goes this way, tread line works this way. Well, the most recent one, here's the thermaler station and the overhead on what happens here. The sawyer stands here, the finisher here. You might be doing 2 of these positions at the same time, so let's change out that grid. But most commonly, based on 0 to 1, I'm going to break this down, because then that gives me some ladders. It gives me some pay grades. It gives me some standards under the situation without getting fucking dead inside here about bullshit causes that cause a lot of pressure, stress, and anxiety about things that don't need to be that way in terms of what this material might be compensating to. Because here we are on the map. This would be the draw out, which might have a few paths that you need to take before you go. But let's assume it's limited like Zelda here. I know I have to go to the first cave, then the second cave, then the third cave. Or there's some fancy speedrun hack on this that you gotta be careful with that. It might become necessary, it may not be necessary, given that I'm doing 2 jobs inside of here, or I'm running this whole tread line by myself, or this field, and I'm, you know, I don't have the luxury of having a unit or patrols or anything like that inside of here. So how would you go about drawing that out? How would you go about kind of detailing that? And again, generally what I'd do is, again, I play the chess game because it's a little bit better. But here's a basic example. Now, I didn't continue this because I was choosing a different route. I was going about this in another way because this is an overhead version of what I go to train this. You know, I want to make sure the kids have that degree inside of this mill or this building or whatever job application that they have, mathematical thesis or otherwise, into divergent flows inside of there. You get masked out one way or another, but you want to be practical in the after action report, right? You want to say the Article 15 was due to the incident report and the investigation of eyewitness testimony not being necessary, to what Zelda's doing inside here about this kind of black hole problem, realistically. You know, IH derivative wave function over R derivative X. Now, that's a simplified version, excuse me. Being a 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional derivative wave function, I need a lot of these different versions to then test the speed, the probabilities, the most efficient version, marginal utilitarian version of it. And again, when I have somebody out here, well, you were way over here, what gave you the polarized cyclical transitories to get you over there inside of here, when most commonly graphed on wave functions it shouldn't have been that way? Now, that's a real special force. That's a heavy duty number that I'm not saying that they don't do that. Let me first be very clear about that notation. When you would have to, because there wouldn't be a way around it not to, why is the explanation under this value not considered infinity in algebra, calculus, right? Here are these cyclical cells, these these photons, right? And basically you're setting this up like Ricci's calculus, you're setting it up like Bernoulli's equality and the exclusionary principle, all in one run right here, because basically through the doors of a day of a calculus class you could set that up any way you want. And there's not really a wrong answer to that value, but still, you know, we haven't left the field once inside here, but without any kind of practical value. An apple tree, firstly, the orchard of apple trees more specifically. Out here, let's start planting rows and columns, but we're gonna need a water supply issue here. It's not like we have a natural thing, so we got to dig down or truck in water bottles inside here, because that would be the special forces or the renormalization of this ability that actually applies this to some of the things that would be necessary. Now again, there's not a lot of difference between terms X and or A delta V. It's changing. When you go this to life or perspective or momentum, there's really not a lot of a difference, so I wanted to make sure I put that in here like that. Get you on the next one.